Hello, everybody. Can you hear me well? Give a thumbs up. Awesome. Well, I know this is 5 minutes into when we're getting started, so there is a lot to talk about. So we'll just let people kind of trickle in. We actually have an amazing turnout of folks that want to join the conversation today. So just wanted to say hello and welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us today for our last Talk Nerdy to Me webinar series for 2021. I cannot believe the year is actually coming to an end, but what a better way to end with a very fruitful and interesting conversation amongst friends or clients, agency partners. My mom and dad are here. I mean, everybody wants to join the conversation of Web3. So hello, my name is Gabriela Merrihue. I am the executive producer of new business development here at Thinkingbox, based out of Los Angeles. And I am going to be your host today. And I am joined by our amazing, brilliant panel of Thinkingbox experts that will introduce themselves in a little bit later. But for those of you guys who are just joining us for the first time and actually do not know what Thinkingbox is, Thinkingbox is actually the modern evolution of a digital-first creative agency. And we work alongside our amazing clients and agency partners to bring to life in a craftful way and a smart way, everything that is from experiential to digital to content and social. So we thought, why don't we all get nerdy together through these series and learn more about Web3. We were already doing it from a personal standpoint, from passion points, to also, needing to learn a lot more as agencies and clients were coming to us, really kind of inquiring about Web3 and what is Bitcoin and what is NFT, and all of these conversations are just kind of first and top of our mind. So we really kind of wanted to have the conversation with all of you guys. So today we will be talking about Web3. We have a full agenda, guys. So to be honest, like after the discussion we've had with the full panel, we said this might just be part one. I mean, there's a lot of conversation that's going to happen today. So we encourage you guys to, put your questions in the chat, interrupt us, raise your hand. We'd really want to just see kind of what you guys are thinking of everything that we are talking about. But with that, the agenda today, we really are going to take you through the journey of where it started, Web 1 to 2 to where we are today with 3. We're going to talk about the blockchain, the metaverse, how it all applies to you, your projects, your passions. And, obviously getting into security, privacy, and ethics, that this is all very new and quickly evolving as well. And what is the opportunity? Where is the future? How can you apply this to your projects, your life, anything that you're thinking about? And of course, Q&A. We'll leave about 5 minutes in the end, but there's a lot to talk to you guys about. So please, again, put everything in the chat. We will get to your questions, if not today, in the following one, or actually also we will follow up with an email kind of answering everything in the end as well for all of the participants. Next. Jess, next slide. So as I said, today's panel is from all of Thinkingbox around Canada and in the US. To start is our amazing Chief Creative Officer, Michael Kern. We're joined by Pattrick Daggitt, who is our creative technologist out of Vancouver, Ryan Parrish, who is our senior software developer out of SLC, and myself out of LA. So with that said, guys, take it away.
There we go. Now we're unmuted. Now we have the control back in our hands. All right. Hey, everybody. If you saw on that slide above, you can see some of the NFTs I'm holding there. So we decided to show that off a little bit in there. And there will be lots of little nuggets peppered throughout today. But because this was a really, really complex topic, we're going to call this kind of 101. I think we're talking actively about having a panel after this that's a lot more open, a lot more free flowing. But I think today we wanted to get everybody in on the basics. And as with anything like this, we have to do a very legal disclaimer right up front. So I'm going to literally just read it because that way we're legal. Nothing we're about to present should be considered financial advice. We're not financial advisors. We're generally idiots. If you follow anything that we say, you will go broke and lose all your money. Please do your own due diligence. So that's our disclaimer. All right, next slide. All right, so just for a little framework for this conversation, I think like we wanted to talk about a little bit about why we're talking about this today. So I love this. There's this book called Liquid Modernity by Zygmunt Bauman. And it's kind of this idea that the whole book is about we are overwhelmed right now with technology, and a lot of how that technology works. Like the theory is that it's basically moving faster than our mind is able to catch up with or able to perceive. All right, next slide. And so why are we talking about this today? Why Web3 today? I think obviously this is the big kind of question that everyone, we see it all over PR, we see it everywhere in every kind of, every publication out there right now. And the truth of the matter is it's because of COVID. COVID has accelerated anything we do from a web standpoint because we're looking for new ways to connect. And so what's awesome about Web3 is it's kind of this future vision of how we're going to be connecting with each other. And that's really, really exciting. So next. And so why are we hearing about it? One, we got a lot of hype overload right now, right? Like crypto has kind of hit an all-time like mass high in terms of people talking about it. And then we also have FOMO. So we have, you talk to your parents at the dinner table at Christmas time, they're going to be like, oh, are you doing anything with crypto? And I think like that's become like the common source. My 80-year-old father actually asked me if I was investing in crypto lately. And so it's pretty obvious that like all of society right now is kind of feeling this and wants to know more. But there's a ton of hurdles, barriers, and things that like people just don't understand about this world. And so that's what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Mike. That's great handoff.
Ryan's going to start us off with how we got here.
Yeah, exactly. So Web3 is super exciting. You've probably heard the term go around a lot lately. It's definitely gaining momentum. And I personally feel like it's going to change the landscape of how we interact with the web and each other and do business. And it's really going to have a huge impact in the future. I think to start, we kind of need to, look at where we've came and where we're going. So kind of go with the initial phases of the web, the landscape of where it's come from. So Web 1, if you guys all remember, is like the very early stages of the web, 1995-ish or so. We all got those AOL discs in the mail, and it was just the big buzz, and everybody was getting on the internet with the dial-up modems, and we all know that sound. That's essentially Web 1. So this was like a read-only, one-way street. So the content in Web 1 was basically created, and then the users were digesting it. So you can think of it as like Encyclopedia Britannica online. So it was basically like a directory of services that you could look at and see. It was mostly business focused, and it derived kind of from magazines, newspapers, and the radio. It's a place for those publications to put their content online.
Kind of like that, Ryan, it's kind of like that desktop publishing thing, right? It's like the advent of like the original like Macintosh, right? It was so much about desktop publishing, and that was really what the first thing we did on the web as well.
Right, yeah, literally we called it the desktop and even adopted like the mouse term and all these things that we still carry on. So next we come into Web 2. This is kind of like the digital age that we all live in now and work in. So Web 2 is exciting. It has APIs we can use to ping services. It's primarily a web where the content is created by users, and it's made so that users can earn, gain likes, and then promote their skills. So Web 2 is what we call the centralized application. Most services are hit through a server, and then they come back to the user. So all the services, AWS, Twitter, all these Facebook things, they're all hitting a server, and ultimately they have control. And what they're doing is using people as the data point so that we give them the information they need. They can serve up the information we expect. So essentially, we're becoming the miners of our own, or they're mining our data. And the monetary value is going into those services, not the users. And so it's an interesting paradigm how we're kind of changing that, where Web3, and as you're going to see coming down the slides, we're sort of flipping the switch on that. And I love this slide because it kind of puts that in perspective. All these giant conglomerates, Facebook, Google, all them, they're, essentially like oil rigs mining the resources, but what they're doing is mining our data, and they're effectively selling it back to us. So it feels a little bit, dirty, just like an oil rig. These icons here are just kind of the evolution of some of the protocols, how they've evolved from Web 1 to Web 2. So I won't go too deep into the details, but you can see how like the early adoptions of these protocols have been developed with a little bit more advanced API calls to use these services, SMS to Messenger, and we have all these advanced email features and file sharing and chat features that we all use today. And one big thing about like Web 2 and Web 3 is it's not going to be a clean cut. Like we're evolving, everything kind of, overlaps each other. So we're definitely going to see plenty of Web 2 space in the Web 3 world and back and forth. Big part of becoming a Web 3 developer is understanding Web 2. So just keep that in mind. I think a lot of these services, Twitter, they're all going to be very quickly adopting these new Web 3 protocols and then starting to integrate them into their services. So we'll see that coming down the road. Just one tip on web. So if I mentioned Web 1 was kind of like Encyclopedia Britannica, Web 2 is kind of like Wikipedia. It's user-based, everybody has an input. It can be published online with whoever wants to do it. There is some governance around like what gets published, but for the most part, it's data driven by the users. Web 3 is similar in that way, but it is actually data that we get to own. So Web 3 is amazing. We're taking a centralized platform to a decentralized platform, and that's sort of where the term blockchain comes from. So if you think of a computer as an individual block, the server is actually in the computer, and we are chaining those together. So it's kind of like every computer together becomes a supercomputer. So in that way, we're not using these services. We're not hitting a specific server. So when AWS goes down, we're not held accountable for it. Also, if they want to can a service, change the way something works, we, the users, the ones who make this service, get to have a say in that. So it's super awesome. Another way of looking at it is like the semantic web. So Web 3 is going to be inoperable. All services will be able to work together with a common language that everything can understand. So we're not trying to like adhere to a certain API. These services will all kind of be interoperable, and it'll be super trustworthy. All the data is stored in a ledger where it's publicly available, completely transparent. You can see on any given time, any hour of the day, what's going on. There's no hidden things going on there. And it's super secure. The data is basically backed by metadata that is codified in the system. So anything that happens within Web 3 automatically gets validated through code that can codify this data. So with that, we get digital permanence. All transactions, all happenings have a store in the ledger. So we get to see and have access forever what's going on in this world. It's self-governing. The users themselves are the one who are driving the direction of this new sort of protocol. So we, as users, own our data. We also have control over where it's doing and what it gets used for. And then, as I mentioned before, it's decentralized. We're not tied to a specific server. We actually get to broadcast through the entire world of all the different blockchain, all the different chains that keep this service, keep it afloat. So it is very secure. It's very it's going to stay around, and we're ultimately in control of how it responds and how the data gets used. So I think we're going to see all the businesses adopt this. It's really amazing, and there's a lot of terms to go around. We're going to kind of dive into that a little more down the slides. but I just want to say this is going to be awesome. So users own their data, global digital transactions are secure, and online exchanges of info and value are secure. And yeah, that's kind of a very quick crash course on Web3 introductions.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so there's lots of terms that get thrown around, and I just wanted to take a step back and maybe look at some of the basics of where this all came from and what some of these common terms mean in as simple English as possible. So we're just going to start by taking a look at the history. So in 2009, there was a white paper published that laid out the framework for a digital token of exchange. That very first token was called Bitcoin. And the novel thing about the concept of Bitcoin was this idea of a blockchain. So a immutable or unchangeable record of where these tokens are, who has them, and how many they have. A great way to think about it is just a 2-column spreadsheet, one with people's addresses and the other ones with their balances. That was in 2009. Since then, there's been thousands of cryptocurrencies that have been created. The most notable of which was in 2015 when we saw Ethereum. And Ethereum added a 3rd column to this spreadsheet. So no longer was it just addresses and balances, but this 3rd column was actually able to store pieces of code that could be also immutable, just like the transaction records. But these pieces of code can be ran on a supercomputer that is made up of all of the different computers running a smaller version of the blockchain. And people can rent those for Ethereum and run these pieces of code. Yeah, and now, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of coins that we have. And next slide. So these are 3 terms that you're going to hear all the time. You're going to hear about crypto, you're going to hear about blockchain and smart contracts. I just wanted to break these down so that everyone has a really strong foundation for what exactly these mean. So the cryptocurrencies are these digital tokens of exchange. They have many purposes now. The technology has been transformed from what it was in 2009, but essentially they are virtual tokens. They are a sand dollar. They are a block of gold or a bill, but they're digital. So we can transfer them for free instantly across the internet and prove that they are original and limited. The blockchain is an interesting concept. So that spreadsheet I was talking about, everyone's used, Google Sheets or Excel, and they have that history tab and they can see how the spreadsheet has changed. Well, every time the spreadsheet changes, those changes are compiled into what is called a block, and they are submitted to people who are storing an individual copy of the blockchain. So these blocks are submitted to all of the people holding a copy of the blockchain. And once everyone agrees that that is a valid block, it is added to the end of the chain. This chain can be traced back all the way to the very first coins. And we know where all of the funds have been transferred and who owns what balance. That chain itself is immutable. It can't be changed. And if you were to change it, Patrick's account has 1 million Bitcoins in it. Tomorrow, only my one node would be able to say that, because everyone else would say, Pattrick has 0 Bitcoins, and I would get booted out of the blockchain. So having these separate copies of this identical blockchain all being verified against each other makes the blockchain very resistant to tampering and super secure. And that is where these advancements in the technology have really stepped above what we had before 2009. And then the last thing is you hear the term smart contract. That's that 3rd column in the Excel spreadsheet of the blockchain that I've been talking about. These are these pieces of code that live in the Ethereum blockchain. And those pieces of code are what make the Web3 experience possible. Those pieces of code run to essentially replace things like JavaScript or Lambda scripts or a lot of the scripting languages that make Web 2.0 run. This code is, again, immutable. And so it's very important that it's written correctly and securely, because it's very hard to change. This slide is basically just to talk about the validity of the project. A lot of people, when they hear crypto, they think, it's in dark alleys, criminals exchanging money. There's a lot of really big actors in the space. We have large companies like IBM and Microsoft using the technology. Even whole countries like El Salvador recently have adopted Bitcoin as their national currency. As we see this movement continue, and we see Web3 kind of flourish into the people's internet, the profile of people in the space is just getting higher and higher.
I think, Patrick, we've talked about this, but one thing that a lot of people don't know is that if they've got their own portfolio, right? Like, let's say you've got a 401k or a portfolio, that most likely has some amount of crypto in it because there are major companies on the NASDAQ or the US stock exchange that are holding crypto within their portfolio. So we know obviously Tesla and Elon Musk and people like that, but many companies, I think Intel's a big holder of crypto as well, are holding this. So there's a good chance that by way of like circumstance, you probably have some crypto in your like financial portfolio already.
And there'll be more opportunities to do that too. I think there's, ETFs and derivatives and stuff that you can buy now that are basically based in crypto investments.
And whole micro kind of finance options as well, right? Like the give your extra 35 cents to whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And it can scale, right? You don't need to buy a whole coin or anything like that. This slide here is all about kind of what makes the Web 3.0 technology and crypto better than the tools that we had before it. The biggest one is access. Because it lives online, it can be used by 1.7 billion people who are currently underbanked in countries like Africa and South America. It makes access to financial services far easier to get. That distributed nature of the blockchain and how one person tampering one node won't affect the rest of the blockchain makes it super secure and more resistant to having trusted third parties involved. No longer are we needing to trust a third party. It's kind of all directly related to the security of each individual node. It's quite efficient because it's on the internet. We can transfer large amounts of funds internationally within a few seconds with almost no fees. This was unheard of before 2009. International bank transfers could take days or even weeks, depending on the amount before this. And now it happens instantly over the global network that we call the internet. It has some privacy advantages. Although the blockchain is public, the ability to store your funds offline and in a secure manner provides that privacy to users. And because of smart contracts, not only are these just tokens of exchange, but we can run programs automatically on the Ethereum blockchain and lots of other blockchains that have smart contracts to automate a lot of the administrative tasks in the financial world and beyond. Things like loans or even mutual funds, asset managers and stuff could all be managed either automatically or by the community of owners who have invested into these projects. So it's a whole new wave for the finance world. This guy here, this slide is just to show you that the blockchain is public knowledge. You don't need to be a miner. You don't actually need to hold the blockchain to explore it. Sites like Etherscan will let you look at every transaction and the time logs and addresses associated with it in real time. So it's definitely encouraged to go through and kind of explore it because you can see the blockchain at its base and exactly what's being stored there. It's quite interesting to see how it works, and it's not that complicated. So it's pretty enlightening to take a look at what's happening on the blockchain in real time. This here is a screenshot of Coinbase. Coinbase is probably one of the biggest, not markets, what's the word I'm looking for here? Exchanges for crypto. It's a great on-ramp for people to take money or funds from traditional sources and transfer it into coins. They are a custodial service, so they will store the coins for you. Do so at your own risk, but they have the top 1,000 coins there available. They also have derivatives and other products that you would find in traditional investment firms, but within the crypto space.
They're kind of the E-Trade or Morgan Stanley of crypto right now, currently.
Exactly. And the Economist has a Christmas edition that goes through and interviews the people who run the top 4 exchanges. And it's pretty interesting to see the differences between them. This next one is just talking about wallets. So we're focusing on Web3 here, and what makes Web3 run is this supercomputer of people holding the Ethereum blockchain up and utilizing the power of those combined computers. In order to access that computer, you need a wallet to identify yourself, 1, and 2, when you make any changes to the blockchain, you'll have to pay tiny little bits of Ethereum as you go along. This is a new financial incentive. Web 2.0 was selling our personal data. Web 3.0, the financial incentive is using crypto to make the engine of Web 3.0 work. So the creators get paid in crypto, and the users will pay small amounts of crypto in order to interact on Web3. In order to do that, you need to have some way of storing crypto. So this MetaMask is a great wallet that lives as a Chrome extension in your Chrome browser. You can use it to identify yourself or to activate different pieces of smart contracts throughout Web3. There's also hardware wallets, which are separate pieces of hardware that have all the encryption hardware and signing ability to interact with the blockchain on a separate piece of gear that removes any concerns about malware or spyware on your computer itself, and really is a great place to store any crypto tokens for long term if you're worried about hacking. And then the third one that I wanted to mention is just cold wallets. And this is slang for basically just like writing your private keys down on a piece of paper or like engraving them in metal. If you really want something that's resistant to being hacked and secure, the best way is to take it completely off of technology and just store your private keys in a way that's a little more durable and less digital.
Cool. So I think we get to the fun topic of NFTs. So I think everyone here, at least at this point, like has some familiarity with NFTs from a rudimentary standpoint. NFTs are non-fungible tokens. So essentially what they are is, and what they've enabled really crypto to do is to express itself as in an exchange system almost. So what's cool about NFTs are essentially it's artwork. So digital artists on here have created all sorts of different artwork, and you can basically use crypto to purchase that. Now, it's a lot more complicated than that. I think most people think of this as, oh, well, it's a JPEG. I can just like grab that image and like download it to my computer. Yes, you definitely can. But as to what Pattrick pointed out earlier, you still don't own that JPEG. So even though you've downloaded that over to your computer, yes, you have a picture of that and you could probably do something with it if you want. But if you were to go back and look at the records, you still would not be the original owner. So what it's done is it's allowed artists to sell their work and give ownership to people and have that ownership like last forever ad infinitum until that person decides they want to sell it. That's always been like a very tricky thing in the art world, right? Like forgeries, that kind of thing have happened for years and years and years. And what this does is this says it's really impossible to forge something. But yes, like sure, the left one there, I could basically print out that Beeple and post it on my wall and I would have it, right? But you still would not own that original Beeple artwork. So just to go through high level NFTs, I want to talk about just some different kind of categories of them. We've got NFTs like Beeple, which are, you know, the one on the left here. I'm sure everybody's heard about the big Christie sale that Beeple made, where he took his everyday projects and sold them for, I believe, $70 million, something along those lines. And this is kind of what I'd classify as like one type of NFT. This is kind of the artist NFT, right? So this is something where the artist went out, they created that NFT, and they went out and sold it to make money. You also have NFTs like the second one in there, which is CryptoPunks. CryptoPunks is a collection by a company called Larva Labs. And they basically, this is one of the earliest, and the reason this has validity is it's one of the earliest NFT projects that were out there with a large collection. And then you've got things like Decentraland, which is the one in the top right here. Decentraland is a place where I can go on, and basically that's where the metaverse is getting built. So I can go on and own a piece of land in this in the Decentraland system, and basically own that piece of land and do whatever I want with it in the future. And people are like kind of speculating and building like Minecraft houses and all sorts of things on it. So eventually the vision is one day this will be a whole like environmental world unto itself. And then you have kind of like these, what I'd call like newer NFT collection projects. So these are like some hyped ones that I decided to include in here, which are Meta Legends and Hate Beasts. And you'll notice, like, we can go to next slide, you'll notice that there is a monkey gorilla thematic to the artwork and to some of the sales that you see. We don't really, I mean, that kind of dates back all the way to Web 1.0. I'm not going to go into that history, but next slide. There we go. So another ape-based one is Bored Ape Yacht Club, which I'm sure some of you guys have seen. Very, very famous celebs are bought into this project. And so what's really important about these projects, particularly the ones that aren't done by artists, is they uphold a community value. So I believe there's 10,000 Bored Ape Yacht Clubs images. And if you're an owner of one of these, you essentially belong to an exclusive club, right? It's kind of like owning owning an expensive supercar or something along those lines. And you're kind of part of that. And not only that, but you get voting rights within that community. So every NFT that's sold, essentially 5% goes back to the creators, and that creators amount goes into a treasury. That treasury then is allowed to be voted on by the community that is an owner. And so what makes this really powerful is, like in the case of Bored Ape Yacht Club, I think it was like a week, 2 weeks ago now, they held a big party. The Strokes were there. I think Aziz Ansari opened up, et cetera. And they basically, anyone who owned a Bored Ape was able to go to that party and rub shoulders with other influential people, particularly in the tech world, because it's mostly us nerds that are getting involved in this right now. And then, oh, go back one. Thank you. I wanted to just highlight, this is literally yesterday's news. Artifact was another company. They're actually ironically based here in Utah, and they had been making different types of shoes and wearables for the metaverse. And as of yesterday, Nike actually purchased them. So this is starting to be big business at this point. And it was an undisclosed amount, so we know what that probably means. Now, I'm going to theorize on why Nike did this, but essentially my belief is that Nike went in and they've gotten a lot of slack for kind of not being in the NFT market yet at this point. People, and I think they've been really careful to tread on it and not get like hard rejection when they go in. And I think by buying Artifact, what they did was add validity to their team. They added instant buy-in by going with a company that had already made a big splash in the NFT world. All right. And so talking about community, I think this is like a huge part of the NFT world. We have Discords. And this is kind of, you'll find it all over crypto. If you're interested in DAOs or anything along those lines, like all of them have communities. And you can think of Discord basically like your work Slack, right? It's just a place with a lot of channels, open discussion, and then usually big announcements from the creators of those projects. There is even voting on here, like they'll kick you to voting areas where you can vote on things that users within the community have actually created. So this is where everyone talks, everyone communicates. Next slide. And everyone pumps and dumps. So this idea that like people will get on there, they'll hype something up and it'll pump it up, and then like everybody will like then dump it off. And so we want to just show a couple like really quick fun terms that you'll see all the time in kind of the NFT and crypto landscape. Another one there in the center there, to the moon. So like you'll often see people going to the moon, which means like basically just like they want to take that particular project way, way up. Gas fees, which Pattrick mentioned before, gas fees are essentially that little micro transaction, that micro cost of basically doing business in this world. So I buy an NFT, I have to pay a gas fee for it. I do an exchange of some sort of cryptocurrency, I have to pay a gas fee on it. You're basically paying for the network services. And then the last one there is diamond hands, which is really just this idea of holding. It's like long-term, short-term hold. You'll see paper hands as the opposite of that, which means short-term hold. People are flipping things for money quickly.
Just to add one thing about gas fees, like it might seem crazy that you're going to pay to use the internet, but we're already paying to use the internet. We're just paying with our data. So there's a trade-off there.
Right. We are paying the TikToks, Twitters, Facebooks of the world, essentially. Cool. So Web3 and Metaverse is kind of a synonymous term right now. They're very, very closely interrelated. And I think our belief is that these two will converge at some point, and really it's going to be the same thing. It's all one thing. It is all Web3. Maybe we'll call it all the Metaverse. I don't know yet at this point. Next. And one of the ways that I love to think about this is it's kind of the digitization of everything. So everything in the real world, in the physical world, has a thing, right? So with music, there was vinyl, right? And then we made that vinyl digital by making CDs. And then we took that to the internet by making MP3s. And I think this is a really nice analogy for what we're going to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Everything in some form or other will be digitized. And that valuation can totally be equivalent. Like I might pay just as much for a vinyl record as I would for an MP3. And I think both have validity to them, and we can see what that validity is. I think what's hard here is when we talk about the metaverse, there's a much larger abstraction and not everything has a one-for-one value yet. But this is a great way for people to just think about it. Next slide. And a lot of this, it's been around for a long time. So spatial computing, this is an example of just like the idea of spatial computing, right? It's this digitization of everything that's physical. One of the early examples I can think of this that we all have used is Google Earth, right? So when we use Google Earth, that is really just an expression of the world around us digitized. The differences between Google Earth and what we're seeing in the metaverse or what we're seeing with Web3 is that I can't own the same piece of real estate right now on Google Earth. And that is kind of like what we're moving towards. We're moving towards the ability to own our world in digital. Next. So let's look at some expressions of where we can see the metaverse today. So the most obvious one, movies, right? Like this is really simple, right? Like if anybody here has seen Ready Player One, Spielberg movie from 2018, like this is exactly what we're moving towards. A world where everything's digital and we interact with it. And that has all sorts of like tropes, faux pas, everything else that go with it. But it's a really simple like analogy. And I think one that is very much based on the video game world. Next slide.
Hey, Mike, is that kind of like Free Guy, the Ryan Reynolds movie? I just saw it last week.
It's kind of the inverse of that actually.
Oh,
yeah.
got it. Okay.
Right, it's like the metaverse, like when we think about Ready Player One, like we are expressing our world in digital, whereas Free Guy, it's like he's basically trying to come out of the computer, right? So it's like the computer's coming to life. That's a little more like AI brought to life. But yeah, I had the same thoughts.
Similar, yeah, got it.
So where can we see this? We can see it in gaming, right? So games like Fortnite, Roblox, they have monetary exchange systems. You can buy skins for your characters. The money that you spend in there often is real money spent in a virtual world. Next. We're seeing it in fashion, right? So we're seeing it show up like Balenciaga did a big NFT project. They've also done Fortnite skins. So fashion is actually leading a lot of the charge when it comes to like the consumer goods areas. They're kind of the first that I think, one, they can dabble, always be a little more experimental. They do commercials that go, hello, right? And so I think they get a little more liberty with how they sell. But I think that's a great place to start seeing it. Next. And then industry and industrial applications. So There are applications like Spatial, which was actually, if any of you guys follow MIT Media Lab, Spatial is kind of not necessarily an offshoot, but it's by a former MIT Media Lab guy. And essentially it's like, think about Slack meets Zoom meets a 3D program. We can get into it and actually have and build and create together. Next. And then what here's a little self plug for us here, virtual production environments, right? So when we go to actually create a virtual production, a lot of the technology we're using with that is actually starting to express itself in gaming for Web3 and the Metaverse, but it's now actually flowing into how we actually create and build things, particularly in the film industry. Next slide. And so what you're going to see is actors be able to be fully digitized, be able to act just like they are in real physical world being expressed into a digital world. And if you guys don't follow this guy, he's fantastic. It's Xanadu, Xanudu, I believe, something along those lines. But he's been going through and basically creating some really, really amazing work, just one guy, where he's blogging and creating like kind of shorts with this stuff. And it's fantastic. And then we also see, when we talk about industrial applications, we also see it in training systems, right? So Walmart, places like that have been using it to train customer service reps so that they know where things are in the store. Surgeons are using this, like proven technology from like Metaverse side of things and VR headsets are, you're getting 29% faster operations, 6 times fewer errors within those operations. And that's pretty interesting. That's pretty like, we're still really early on. We're still strapping a shoebox onto your head to make this happen, which means the potential for this in industrial applications is really amazing. Next. And then of course we have Zuck. We don't know what he's going to do in the metaverse yet, but I think we can all speculate that he would like us all to live in Facebook. And we'll see how social applications are actually played out. I think, again, this one's really in the infancy. We're not quite there yet, but we'll see it soon.
This one also just shows that you can lose a bit of weight in the metaverse as well.
That's true. That's true. All right. So we wanted to at least do some precursor addressing. I think this is what I'd really like to have conversations on after we kind of give this 101, but I think like how this stuff applies to us, right? So how does it apply to the advertising world that most of us live in? Next slide. So advertising and marketing is no longer, it's not about making people want something anymore. It's going to be about making things that people want, right? It is very much a creator's culture, like the Metaverse, Web3. We talk about that own a lot of times in there. It's a rewrite own. That own is a creator culture ideology, right? Where we can actually work side by side with brands to actually make something that is worth real value. Next slide. And a couple quick charts. We just want to show this skews young, right? Like I've already outmoded myself to the downside of this curve. But it skews very young, like we're talking that 18 to 40-year-old range is where you have mass adoption. And I think as we hit kind of like critical points, you're going to see that tick up all the way across the chart. Next. So a great example of like in industry, how this is working when we talk about gaming is like the Ariana Grande concert and the Rift tour that she did. This project in particular, I believe Ariana made, I think it's $20 million or north of $20 million for a 10-minute concert in Fortnite, right? And her entire tour from last year was 200 million. So in the span of 10 minutes, she made 1/10 her tour from the previous year. And that's pretty telling as to like where the adoption level is and just how much profit can be made in this market and how much easier it makes it for the creator at times. Next slide. Another great project that this one's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks old here is Budweiser basically went through and created NFTs out of 1,936 of their cans, which is ironically the same, not ironically, deliberately the same year that they came out with the can, which was 1936, and sold these on OpenSeas and everywhere across the NFT markets. So very practical, easy to do NFT kind of project. Then we look at something like Nike Land. Nike Land spent a ton to basically get inside of the Roblox environment. And so what they did was they took a lot of the Roblox structure that's already there, and they said, we want to build the Nike campus in Roblox and use some of the same theories, like they have Flora's Lava games and things like that inside of Roblox. And people have loved it. And then we have things like the Guccidynes bag, which is, this sold for $4,100 in, I believe, in Roblox as well. And it's just kind of like, yeah, brands can go out there, like Gucci can go out there, put this out there, and people will pay real money in that virtual world. And
just to add, just to go back for 1 sec, the interesting thing about this bag too, and the immutability of storing things like NFTs on the blockchain, you'll see digital items like this be cross-platform. There will come a day very soon where you can buy this bag and take it anywhere you want in the universe, and it will always be yours. That level of permanence really brings something to it.
You're going to see times where you're going to buy this bag in a virtual world, and then you're going to get it in the physical world as well. Like you're going to cross in both directions, right? Cool.
Okay, it's back to me. Yeah, so we're in kind of a whole new world here, and it's important to kind of look at some of the dangers of what we're talking about as well. Next slide. So the first thing is about security. Because these tokens aren't being stored within an insured space like a bank, maybe there's a bit of insurance in something like Coinbase, but that'll only protect you to a certain level. It's really important that you take your security seriously. So anytime you have tokens of any type of value, you should think about securing them on a hardware wallet, which is what you're looking at here. The Ledger is a great choice. There's another one called a Trezor, which is also very good. And these, again, just take your tokens and move them to a space that is fully secured through encryption and off of the hardware that you're using every day that might have some spyware on it. Again, there's other ways of, oh, okay, yeah, let's fly, sure. Privacy. So privacy is kind of twofold in this space. The blockchain itself is fully public, so that's going to bring a lot of transparency to larger actors moving funds around. Politicians and corporations will be fully accountable to what they're doing with their money and where it's coming from. But then as we shift to Web3 and the product becomes less about what data of ours can be harvested and sold to advertisers, and more about the products and the function of the internet itself, and we pay with these little microtransactions to use the internet, that's going to ultimately provide more privacy to the end user because they're not being followed everywhere around the internet, and it's kind of on their own accord where they would like to be tracked. And then the next slide is really about ethics. And so because our job is to shape the digital future, we need to ask ourselves carefully, what were the downfalls of Web 2 and how we can kind of circumvent that and create a better place for everybody.
Yeah, Patrick, you and I have talked about this. Naturally, the thing that happens here is that because of the way it works, just incumbently, you have lots of people voting within given contracts. And so you have this evening playing field, right?
Yeah, we don't have a central authority telling us what's right and wrong for the internet. It's really up to us to shape that future, and everyone will get an equal say, which is really, really exciting.
We're going to answer the age-old question: is humanity good or evil? Basically.
Yeah, basically, it'll be on us. So yeah, there's some concerns about, undermining fiat currencies and governments. I mean, we live in a global world, so that power dynamic is kind of changing anyways, but we should be pretty careful about how we treat issues around there. And there's also, some protocols and tokens that they're different utility than, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum. One that comes to mind is this thing called Filecoin. And Filecoin are basically these tokens that are given as a reward for people storing files on their computer within the Filecoin blockchain. That's great for permanence of images and different types of media that would be associated with an NFT. Let's say you want it to live forever, you put it on the Filecoin blockchain. But there are certain files, I'm sure you can imagine what I'm talking about, like illicit types of files that don't deserve that amount of permanence. So we need to build in systems that will allow us to moderate and control that type of immutability for files that don't deserve that privilege. There's also the ethics of the code being immutable. So there's certain times where we may want to change the code, but the code can't be changed when it's on the blockchain. So the ethics around that and what you submit onto the blockchain need to be considered carefully as well.
Cool. So yeah, to kind of like wrap this up, I'm going to give everybody guidance, some thought starters, some ideas of like what the opportunity here is, just to kind of cue us off into the Q&A land of things. But like, let's touch really quickly just on some things. We've called these things roadblocks. These are also, in my mind, these are the opportunities that exist when it comes to like creating startups around Web3 or the metaverse. So one is really just this idea of infrastructure, right? So, and architecture. So if we think about like the Travis Scott concert that happened in Fortnite, like there were, you know, maybe 10,000 people on each individual server. I don't know what the exact number is, but essentially like, how do we create infrastructure that can hold 1 million people so that I can go into a concert with 1 million people in it and see my friends and know that it's them and be on the same network? That's not really possible today. We don't know how to do that yet. We don't have servers. We don't have systems that are large enough to actually accommodate this. So that's one area. The next is tools. So digital tools need to get better. This is an example of MetaHumans, which is running on Unreal Engine, and really cool tool if like you want to see how to like create actual digital actors. But you know, we need to bring things like 3D and code and programming down to a more basic level for most people. Like in order for mass adoption of the metaverse, like I need to be able to get in here and use that thing quickly and build stuff fast. And that really doesn't exist today. It requires a lot of specialized skills currently. Next. The next is, and Pattrick kind of touched on it earlier, data interoperability. So this is the idea that like, I can take, we talked about that Gucci bag, right? I can take that Gucci bag from Roblox over to Fortnite, over to my NFT collection and have them all be the same thing. Right now, data interoperability is like, you know, it might just live on the Ethereum network, or it might just live on, you know, a different network. And I think like what we need to get to a point of is where I can take that thing with me wherever I go. And that's just not possible in today's kind of Web3 ecosystem. Next. And then we need new models for monetization. And I think we touched on some of those briefly in terms of like how the mining system works, but we're going to, brands and advertisers and everyone are going to have to come up with a new model of actually creation and owning and then monetizing that thing. And we're starting to see that happen. Some of the examples we gave in here are great kind of round ones. This is going to continue to evolve. But what I do love is that things like your traditional ad strategy kind of systems, they're just not going to work in this economy. People won't stand for it. Whereas, you know, in Web 2, they were forced upon us. And then the last piece of this, in terms of really getting to the metaverse to where it needs to be, we just need better UX UI, right? Like, I don't want to strap a shoebox to my head to go into the metaverse. We're going to need to bring that out into the physical world. We're going to need to think about it much more along the lines of like the Star Trek holodeck or something like that. You know, look, Murder, She Wrote was envisioning just what it was going to be like in the metaverse way back when.
This is my favorite slide.
But I think this to me, these are the key problems that we have right now, and the things that are like really exciting about the potential of what we can do next and where the Web3 and the metaverse is going. So without further ado, let's like get to Q&A because that was a lot of info that we just threw at everyone.
Thanks, guys. So interesting. Like I said, please send us your questions on chat. I know we're a minute away from when this is supposed to conclude, but we're more than happy to stay here and answer any questions. So yeah, we can stay around if you guys want to stay around. But I do have 3 questions that came through. One of them is, how does this affect the future of my business and how can I prepare? I know you kind of just touched into that, Mike, but maybe we can expand on preparation.
I mean, that's a really hard question. I think what we've talked about a lot is like, you have to look at the particular business and the thing that's right for it, right? It's like, you don't want to have a miss. Like, as an example of a miss that I just saw this week, that Budweiser piece launched, I think 2 weeks ago. Pepsi basically just launched the exact idea, ripped off like 2 weeks later. And I don't think it's having the same uptick as the first one. And so, as with anything, like, originality still counts. And, I think that is, that's what we do as advertisers. That's how we think about things. And I think, like, my goal with any client is to look at it and say, what's the right approach? What's the applicable approach?
I think a great place to start too is like, look at where the physical meets the digital in your business, because this technology is helping those two blend. So we have the ability to make digital objects one of a kind. We have the ability to automate a lot of administrative tasks automatically with the blockchain. So any points of tension between those two worlds is a great place to start looking at where this can help your business.
Right. And it, like, with that example that Mike just gave with Pepsi, I mean, everything is moving so fast as well. Is there any, kind of blogs or anything that, websites that you think is great to kind of give or attendees that they can like read more and just, get part of the newsletter just so they're always aware of what's happening and we can all get smart together?
I think one thing that would be good is, and we haven't really talked about this, but I'm happy to put together like a list of resources for people.
That's awesome.
It's very disparate right now. And that's the hardest part about, there's no like, I don't know, in like the web world, right? There's no awards for that or FWA for that or anything like that, right? It's like, it's a very much the Wild West and things are happening really quickly. And a lot of people are moving on parallel paths with similar ideas and they're all like, hitting the market at the same time. And so we're going to kind of see that continue to play out over the next probably 2 years, I would say, before we start to really get like refinement. I mean, right now you might get on one site to mint and like, you just have this gut feel that like, oh, this thing is like, it's like when you used to go to the like old credit card processor and you're like, is this really a real credit card processor in my e-com store or not? Like, there is like a trustworthiness factor to it.
Totally. Yeah, people still don't understand it a lot, so there's a barrier. I have right here a question from Cody H. Can you explain exactly what a decentralized app is?
Sure. I could take a stab unless anybody else wants to.
No,
basically, it's like you can think of it as what an app is today. So today we have one-page sites that might have a specific function. They'll let you log in or vote or do something like that. But all of that code is written in one place and it's stored in one place. And when you request it, we have DNS servers that translate the website into an IP address, and it goes to one specific server where all those files are served to you. You can think of it, a decentralized app, as the exact same thing, except all of that code is stored on a blockchain where there are multiple copies all over the internet, and you will get it from the nearest node. And it's confirmed to be legit code from all of the other nodes confirming it. The code itself that is running is stored in a blockchain that is executed in a distributed manner. So it's the exact same structure of what we're already doing with apps and web pages right now, except that it's not going out to a single source and coming back to your computer. It's going out to a global network and then coming back from the nearest node.
Cool. We got another one here from Chris M that I think Mike is going to answer. It says, if a company reaches out to an agency to create NFTs for their product, how is ownership sorted out? Is it any different from other art buys or original work buys? Great question.
Yeah, that's a really complicated question that I would say like it's so dependent on the situation. But by and large, what I've seen happen right now is somebody comes in and they say, hey, will you create some NFTs for us? A lot of times you become part of that project. That's, what I see happen most of the time in the NFT world, because the artist often offers a lot of validity to the project, right? So projects like I'm in Doodles, right? And that's actually by a Canadian illustrator. And, he is a part of that project. He is not the only person in that project. He had a technical team. He has somebody to manage the discords. He has people to actually write the smart contracts. He's really just the artist at that point. And then he ends up basically, through some back end and some agreement, getting a portion of what they make on every single piece. And so, at the same time, there are places where like I could go contract right now if I wanted to start an NFT and like I really wanted to do 3D art of, I don't know, spaceships. I could contract some 3D artist to do that for me and just pay him for that, and then basically publish that under my own account. And it would be wholly mine. So really the account that publishes it is the owner in that case. And so we have something called minting that happens, right? And so minting is essentially like us putting that piece of art onto the blockchain and putting it out there in that permanent record. And once that happens, like whoever's holding that at that given time, they're the owner. So they want to sell it, they sell it. They want to auction it, they can auction it. They want to give it away for free, they can give it away for free. Ironically, one of the things I've seen with security now is that you'll see people actually dumping NFTs into people's hidden wallets. And if you click on them, it will actually like transfer your keys to that person or things like that. So like there are all sorts of like dangerous tricks happening around that world too. But hopefully that answers the question.
Awesome. Another one here, it says, following up on the decentralized app question, are there any performance impacts to take into consideration with a decentralized app versus a centralized app?
Yeah, there are for sure. So the blocks on the blockchain only get confirmed in groups. And so it really depends on how busy the blockchain that you're interacting with is. Sometimes if you're interacting with smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain, it could take, 30 seconds to get a response back. And that is certainly a limitation now, but as this technology grows, it will get faster. And currently there are ways around it. So we can use other cryptos that are just focused on smart contracts in order to speed that up. Solana and Flow are quite fast. And then the other thing that we can do is we can actually pair this technology of the smart contracts with what we already know about cloud computing. And so we can have smart contracts confirm a request and then send it off to traditional cloud computing services in order to do some of the more complex, more intensive work that would be slow on a traditional blockchain and have it delivered in a traditional manner with a cloud computing service.
Cool. Thank you, Pattrick. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we're a little bit, over, but keep them coming if there's a lot of good stuff that we talked about today.
Yeah, I think it would be really fun to actually do something like this and like walk somebody through the whole process of like, making their own NFT or something.
Oh yeah, I want one. I'm jealous.
Well, you could do it in a very raw format where like, you can see everything that's happening along the way, which I think helps people understand a lot of times. I think, I'm a learner. I'm like a hands-on learner. So like the only way I was getting into this was if I actually like went through the whole process.
Right.
Understood everything and made mistakes.
Well, that sounds like a great thing for or 201 kind of web series, so Web3 series. Cool. Well, I think with that, we'll probably wrap it up, and just wanted to say thank you so much for everybody for joining us this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. And like we said, we had so much fun kind of putting this together. I've learned so much through the process. I'm sure you guys did too. We have been recording this session, so tomorrow we'll be sending a link with what we recorded and hopefully that resource sheet that Mike said, if not tomorrow, soon thereafter. I know everybody's kind of dashing before the holiday break, but You know, here you have my email and Mike's email, but also when we send out the link, you'll have our information. If you want to take a deeper dive or get creative with us on NFTs, let us know. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Hope you learned as much as
I'm going to throw a little hint out that like we may or may not be working on our own NFT over here that will be something that will be really cool for the artist community to give back. And so we've been like working on a little behind the scenes pro bono project to give to like the artist communities in all of our cities that will be kind of ran through an NFT system. I can't say much more than that yet, but I think by the next time we do one of these, we'll have it ready to go.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all of our experts and TPX and friends and family and clients and partners, and happy holidays, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, guys.